2, 1.
Live from the Rob Christensen Radio Network Satellite Studio, it's Jim and Rob Over-Analyze the Movies. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Jim and Rob Over-Analyze Movies, the live video podcast where we like to go beyond the review. It is also the home of the best chat on the internet. Tonight we are going to be looking at Denny Villeneuve's Dune. The 2021 version just came out the other night, and we're going to be doing a deep dive on that. But before we get into everything, I think it's time to bring on my my co-host with the most, that aficionado of British vulgarisms, and also a birthday boy not like 3 nights ago, my friend Mr. Jim Chaboyko. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, how's it going? Good. Yeah, pretty relaxed, pretty awesome weekend, and yeah, saw a good movie and in the theater. So theater-worthy movie in the theater. So that
absolutely we did.
Mm-hmm.
Did you? And that was also, Jim, the first time you and I have been in a theater together in a couple of years, like since maybe even well before COVID.
I was trying to think of what probably would have been the fall of 2019, but I can't. Oh no, yeah, it would have been the fall of 2019 at some point, or because
maybe sometime in that winter, but
yeah,
you know,
I mean,
but yeah,
I'd seen 1917 in the theater a couple times with different relatives, and so I was just trying to piece that together, but I don't know if I came up with a conclusion or not, but. Yeah, no, it'd been a while in any case, so it was nice. And the theater that we went to, we went on Thursday night. For the folks not from Winnipeg, we went to the downtown kind of cheapo multiplex, which is $5 for entry, but and we
$5 Canadian dollars for entry.
Canadian dollars, and we went into the big auditorium, like the theaters 1 and 2 are put aside for the big new releases, and there was 2 other people and a guy who fell asleep, which is not indicative of the movie. But so it was totally empty. I was worried about bringing a notepad, which I didn't, and I didn't end up having any cause to be worried. So. But it's nice, big theater essentially to yourself almost. So I quite like that.
Yeah. Prime seat, center, getting the full effect without craning your neck or anything. Yeah. Fantastic experience. All right, Jim, before we get into the news of the day, got a big story and the film. Why don't we say hello to everyone in the chat? We've got an active chat right off the bat. Let's say hello to them.
Hey guys.
First of all, I want to... who's here but the Upside Dan?
Yay! Go Bills.
I think we're going to have a few people who saw it and are keen to talk about it, which is what we're here for. Yes. Who else do we got? DMG. Our friend, Mr. Dragon Movie Guy. Good to see you here, man. And then, of course, 1/3 of the Balmoral Street Research Irregulars, Ms. Katie Fowler, wishing you, sir, a happy birthday.
Thanks, Katie.
And then I believe Jim answered your question. No, we did not see it on IMAX. We saw it in a theater that charges on any release $5.
And the screen only had, it was one of the town cinema screens that only had one drink stain on it from somebody who hurled their pop against the screen at one point. So,
which is noteworthy.
Yes, that means that's pristine.
Yeah. Okay. And then we also have another third of the Balmoral Street Research Irregulars, Mr. Richard L. And apparently the theater that he and his spouse Katie went was pretty full on Saturday night. Very cool.
Which one did you guys go to? You can answer.
I believe they went to. I believe they went to Grant Park, the fancy theater.
Okay. With the layback seats and the
yeah. And then the Upside Down, apparently the theater he went and saw it in only had a handful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's talk about, got it confirmed, Grant Park. All right, Jim, before we get into, like I said, before we get into everything, we do have, and I brought this graphic up, the IA We Stand Together graphic up. While we have very little information on where they're at in the ratification procedure, an awful tragedy. Let's bring this up. A truly terrible one came up. The woman by the name of Helena Hutchins was shot to death on set. Apparently, Alec Baldwin, both the star and the producer of the film, was given a gun that current reports are he thought was unloaded. And was practicing a move, kind of he was shooting a Western, terrible pun not intended, practicing a move, pulling the gun out of the holster, and it went off, killed Ms. Hutchins, and also wounded the director, Joel Souza. As we learn more and more about it, like you can see, it's apparently the first AD who was part of the chain of, let's call it the chain of handling. Mm-hmm. Apparently, Jim, he had some problems on set with people. The set had camera crew walk off, like just say, okay, we're sick of being here. Other potential safety concerns, including gun misfires. Mm-hmm. That said, these are all just current reports, right? Mm-hmm. It'll probably be a week or two before we really got a good picture of what happened on that set. I think it's important to talk about, though, Jim, in the context of, like, everything I've heard so far, I have no problem believing, and I'm, based on my experience working on set, not mm-hmm. for decades, only a couple of years, but you only need a couple of years to go, wow, this actually can be a really crappy workplace. Quoting a friend, I was being a smartass with a local producer representative, and I said, what's Manitoba's industry based on? Cost consciousness and enthusiasm? She's like, well, what's wrong with that? I say this to underline, we are only because of our general approach and laws and rules about guns in Canada have we not had one of these tragedies happen in Manitoba, because it's the same, all reports are it's the same environment. Mm-hmm. Get it done as soon as possible. A lot of machismo, a lot of yelling and screaming, younger, inexperienced people getting bullied by older people with more pull on set. Mm-hmm. Alec Baldwin, certainly not legally culpable. All reports are that it wasn't like he was out to kill the woman. Mm-hmm. But I suspect when we find out everything, him, any of the other producers, even the director who did get shot, but mm-hmm. the director is usually part and parcel of this, the production manager, the first assistant director, all morally culpable.
Yeah,
as they created an environment. But I don't know, what's your take on this again developing story?
Yeah, I mean, just the tragedy of it in several ways is, you had a young, up and coming, by all reports, female cinematographer. Or they called her the director of, I've heard both director of photography and
it's an interchangeable title.
Cameraman, camera woman, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But apparently, and originally from Ukraine, but with a name like Hutchins, which is, I imagine, a married name, had a son. Yeah. Like in a time and place in which there aren't that many, or they're starting to be more female crew members in positions like that. I mean, it's
one
just
of the reasons we talk about the reframe stamp.
Yeah, yeah. So on several levels, just horribly sad. I still remember all the Brandon Lee stuff, and that was before Twitter. So Twitter got pretty gross about this whole episode immediately. And interestingly, the news came out while you and I were watching Dune. I had a text from my wife before she went to sleep, and all it said was, Alec Baldwin shot and killed a woman. I was like, oh my God, what? And it just kind of came.
Well, yeah, as we were leaving the theater.
Yeah.
It was like, what the what?
Yeah, exactly. And then, you have to sort of go home and turn on the TV or look on the internet and see what was going on. But yeah, I mean, I still remember the whole tragedy behind Brandon Lee, as I said, and that was a big story at the time. And again, before Twitter, before any of these sort of
and everything changed then, Jim.
Yeah.
You can tell by the fact that no one has been shot. Oh, wait.
I mean, it's been how many, 30 years now. So that's, at least maybe something. I don't know. I mean, ideally, this would never happen again. But and the whole thing with the Brandon Lee situation is that it was an actor who had shot him. A guy named, I believe it was Michael Massey. He was sort of a haggard-looking guy. He often played, junkies on Law and Order. He was on Law and Order a number of times, and we always sort of wondered, like, if this. I mean, his career did continue on. He passed on in the last couple of years himself, but you sort of wonder if he was haunted by it. But he continued acting. Again, none of it was his fault. It was a prop. A genuine prop and loaded with blanks, and some of the blank particulate it was what killed Brandon Lee. But yeah, just sad. And we won't be hearing the end of this for several years, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think part of the reason it's getting so much attention is because the attention of the potential of, like, we were at the brink of an IATSE strike, not 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Something went wrong while displaying that webpage.
Uh-oh.
And just as it was describing how twice as many stunt people or twice as many camera crew have died on sets in the last 10 years as stunt people, which is usually kind of referenced as the most dangerous job. Which is why, although, the gunplay in part because unlike pre-World War II where live rounds were constantly on set, that was kind of dropping out, even by the 90s, and it's been just less and less. Mm-hmm. That said, it shows just how dangerous and, in my opinion, galactically stupid it is to have, like, real guns on set.
Yeah.
No need for them, other than I was telling friends the other night. I remember when I was on set when there was, guns, always like it was, the procedures were strict. But it was interesting. One of the prop department folks was saying the actors like real guns because they like the weight of it, which I got to admit, like, set is such it's like one of these weird bastions of machismo, especially if those at the top like that stuff. And I strongly believe that's half the reason there was a gun with real bullets on set here. Just that kind of, well, we're doing a Western and I gotta feel the weight, right?
Yeah.
But where was I going with that? It just shows, like, regardless of the mechanism, if we want these big flashy things happening and you don't have a lot of money to do it, well, you do it practically, which means a real car, which is what kills some of these people. It means real, all this stuff. Well, I want to see a real muzzle flash, we don't have money for post-production to put the muzzle flash in the, or it'll look cheap.
Yeah. Well, one guy on CNN actually said there's no such thing as a prop gun. Like any gun is a gun. The notion of a prop gun is a misunderstood notion.
Well, I would disagree with that guy. Like, there's the rubber guns. They're rubber.
Yeah. But I
They're
mean, maybe anything that's fired, maybe that was the distinction.
Probably that's what he was thinking.
Yeah.
You know what? But you don't need a working, like a firing thing on, you know?
Yeah. And the other thing too is that the rule that I understand is you know, and I've shot real guns a number of times in my life. I'm not a hobbyist or anything, but just, you know, as a kid or at air cadets or what have you, because you know you shoot a lot of rifles from planes. But anyway, you know, just you never pointed at anybody, even like just regardless of the circumstance, just never ever pointed at someone.
Always downrange.
Oh yeah, and that's you know, not to blame this all on Baldwin, but if that hadn't been pointed at a person, it wouldn't have killed them, right?
Well,
so,
but yeah, I mean, that's hey, we're practicing with a real firearm.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? They're pointing it at the camera all the time because that's the shot they're going for.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's almost you know, the rules you're talking about don't apply to set, in part because they're like, well, we're different. We need that shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why if you're properly run, it still shouldn't happen. Like, again, I remember, I think it was Christmas Rush, which was about a gang taking over a mall to knock off a safe. Lots of guns, lots of pyrotechnics. They had the armorer, local guy named Dave Brown, always had control of weapons or his assistants. The AD never got involved there. That's not the AD's job.
No.
Always a safety meeting beforehand. We were always walked through the procedure. You know, like this, okay, sounds, because we don't know enough, but it sounds like one of the things was that standard movie procedure was not followed here, you know? And again, I just, it smells to me, Jim, like that. We're in a rush. We got to get the shot. We got to make this happen. They're having people quit on them. You know, some people are saying that she was fighting for her camera crew because they're all exhausted because they had to drive every day 50 miles from Albuquerque to this set there and back every day. And that's just, from city limits to, you know, never mind wherever they live in Albuquerque.
And it's probably taking sleep away from you, even if if you've run a long day and you have to be up early in the morning. Yeah. Could be the difference between 5 and 6.5 hours of sleep or whatever.
Well, yeah, you think about it. If you've got and here they were, they're going to agree to a 10-hour turnaround. So let's say you're off set at midnight, got to be back on set for 10 a.m. Okay, actually, so 1 a.m., maybe 1:30, but let's give benefit of the doubt. They get home at 1 a.m. Decompress. Do whatever shit you have to do. Then, so I don't know, what do you think, Jim, after a long day? You know, are you know, maybe let's say half an hour. Let's just assume ideal circumstances. So it's already 1:30 in the morning and you've got 8.5 hours to sleep, get your crap together and get back on that highway, you know? Yeah, that's cut off another 8.5 hours. Maybe, you know what? You're not getting 7 hours sleep. You're getting 6 because you still got to shower. There's stuff to be done, maybe less. So it sounds like this set, and like so many of these accidents, it's that Swiss cheese model where 8,000 things have to go wrong.
Yeah.
But one of those things that always seems to happen is a cavalier attitude towards safety, because that weakens all the other barriers to somebody getting shot.
Yeah,
You know?
That's true.
You know, I mean, recently I was fortunate enough to be on a Stony Mountain Institution, a prison nearby, and a friend of a guy you remember him from school, Jim.
Yeah.
He was he's a union official now, but he worked out at Stony Mountain as a cook. One of his colleagues, a man I've known and socialized with, was assaulted by an inmate. And again, that cavalier approach of an employer going, well, what's your problem? We train you. These guys are cooks. There's no guard there to keep an eye on things. So shock, something happened. So I was there at the rally. I made a little video about it. Everybody, that woman has got to, that woman's husband now has to explain to their son, well, making a movie, it was important, No, it's like it wasn't going into a combat zone.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, awful, eh?
Yeah, yeah. Pretty sad altogether.
Yeah. Well, I guess on that bummer of a note.
Okay, good night.
let's scan the one of the DMG did mention, said they called it a small indie film, but if you look on IMDb, they have a decent number of famous cast members. So it's like, that mushy, what's indie, and even, chances are still millions of dollars at play, but who's taking all that money, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
just that sort of never-ending search for work. It's oh, I've never done a Western before. Oh, I got 6 weeks here. I got, or whatever the situation is, just that constant need to constantly work.
Well, because you never know. This could be your last offer. But if you take the offer, then there's a good chance you get another offer.
Yeah.
DMG also says, according to AP, 43 people have died on movie sets since 1990.
Man. That's 43 too much.
Curtis, first of all, hello, Mr. Curtis Judd.
Yes, hi.
Curtis, I feel for you. I know when the internet gods are not cooperating with your live stream. So he had a live stream earlier. I showed up literally, went, howdy y'all in the chat. And he's like, amongst buffering and delays, he's like, gonna stop. Okay, we're wrapping this up now. I'm like, goodbye all. Anyway, great to see you here, Curtis. He says the timing of this is ironic with the strike. I think it's very timely. A sad, a darkly ironic kind of comment on what these guys potentially went on strike for. Here's my last question, Jim, going back to the potential of a strike, because they haven't ratified, the union members have not ratified the agreement. Do you think this might actually be one of those things where they all kind of give pause and go, well, wow, the producers, because Alec Baldwin was a producer, the producer's actually shooting us now. Maybe we've got to re-examine this and go, do we actually have the safety guarantees in the contract language we need?
Well, yeah, and I think this story encompasses a lot of what they were fighting for, right?
Turnaround.
Turnaround, that sort of thing. The other thing too, I was wondering, and you initially, I think it sounds ridiculous now, and it's probably because my wife watches Murder, She Wrote, but I was thinking, what if it was an act of sabotage? That's getting a little bit too, like I sat on it a bit and I thought, well, that's
why ascribe to malice what can be attributed to stupidity.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of like the opposite of Occam's razor, Occam's spoon, Occam's pillow. But
Occam's cousin Rube Goldberg's 82-step razor and shaver and sharpener.
Exactly. But I think this is right what they were sort of talking about. So we'll see if And Curtis's comment, the ironic timing is not too far. It's pretty on the nose there. So,
well, maybe we can close this with some thought for all of us should come back home from work safe. Like, this isn't asking too much, you know, and at least here in Canada, although I suspect in a lot of states and maybe even within federally regulated workplaces in the States, you do have, here in Canada, we do have a right to refuse dangerous work. You know, and then if we refuse that, doesn't mean we get to bugger off home, you know, Netflix, you know what, but there's a procedure to either, you know, to adjudicate the issue, to make the workplace safe. So let's all keep that in mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Here's one. We'll take one more comment from DMG and then we'll move forward. And it's a great point. DMG says, I wonder too, the pressure on the female cinematographer to take the gig and to keep it even as her own camera crew is leaving.
Yeah.
You know, may not be the highest paying gig, but once she says, I was cinematographer on an Alec Baldwin film, hard to say no. Couldn't agree with you more, DMG. That totally makes sense to me. You know, he adds, you know, not a lot of female cinematographers in the first place. You bet. And again, that macho douchebag culture, you know, those are all assholes. She might have been an asshole. At least you can kind of give her like sort of a, well, heck, just to be a woman at that level, you know, that she managed to, you know, make it to that point. You know, she's, whether she was an asshole or a lovely person, she had a core of steel, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And probably not in her mother tongue and et cetera, you know, having come from Ukraine and so. Yeah.
Although I understand she came when she was quite young. It wasn't like she, you know, off the boat at 28 and it's like,
I didn't realize.
Menya Zavut Helena. Galina probably.
He's like the camera crew on Bowfinger. Like the next. All right, get in the van.
So Jim, let's move on to Dune. But before we get into the quick review, there has been a lot of hot takes. Like just a ton of them. And you and I have been like DMing back and forth on Twitter as we see them come up. Things like, you know, I can't believe this person didn't see it in the theater. I flipped, you know.
Yeah.
Like just the drama around this movie. What was anyone particularly stick in mind right now or top of mind for you?
You know, I sort of like the timeliness of it. You know, Dune's even got its own hashtag with a graphic, which is like hashtag Dune 2021. And there's the figure of Paul. I'm not sure what he's doing, but it's sort of like
it's
Paul's
emoji sized,
a little emoji kind of thing. But you know, one guy I had today was Dune 2021, Dunes 2023. So, you know, just dumb little tweets like that kind of keeps it fresh. But
I saw a great one, Jim. It was some guy went on a whole like tweet storm, just riffing on it. And he says, Dune is about Dune about a white boy allergic to spice. This is a black man, you know, tweeting about this and said this Denny Villeneuve's a F sharp genius. It's just like, but sorry, I kind of jumped in there.
No, just you know, some of it, some of the fun stuff is the timely humor and people just dropping references into it, and into the, you know, general palaver, and then you know, a lot of it is, you know, you have to see this in the theater, and then people are saying that it's, you know, the people that didn't cotton on to it or didn't enjoy it, you know, there's a lot of I was bored and a lot of those kind of hot takes on Twitter, but there's the committed Dune fans, and then the sort of the newbies as well.
Yeah.
It surprises me because this was required. I only mean this in the metaphorical sense. It was required reading for us as friends, and as part of the same geek crowd
exactly. It was part of our scene
in the south end of Winnipeg in the 80s. Like, almost everyone had their own copy, right? That really thin, or that really thick one with the thin paper, almost onion paper, not quite, and a tiny.
And you saw that it was a Dune.
Yeah,
like it wasn't a worm. It was a Dune, and maybe a couple of folks. They looked like Bedouin travelers,
Yeah.
Which is another thing that's coming up. Ideas of cultural appropriation.
So there's the committed fan versus the newly exposed victim of Dune, I guess, and there's all these things going on. It's kind of fascinating to just to watch. But one of them is, I think I don't know if you want to take the lead on this one, but the comment about it, a masterpiece is a masterpiece, no matter how you see it. I think. I'm paraphrasing it.
I do. It was interesting, Jim. Yeah, you're right. Like, there is a lot of great. Let me bring that one up. I really enjoy. Here, let's give the full window to this, and let me see if I can't make it a little bigger. Okay, so Mark Harris, in responding to, how does it? Ann Thompson writes, a friend of mine admitted he stopped watching Dune on HBO Max after 90 minutes, and I lost it. That's only one part of what's wrong with watching a $165 million space epic shot in IMAX with Dolby sound at home. You have to be immersed, Jim, in something from start to finish. Now, Mark Harris, probably the most reasonable, of a lot of entertaining takes, but he says, I'm going to say this before seeing Dune so that I don't get screamed at. I've never seen a great movie with essential great qualities of which didn't also come through on a small screen. Yes, including 2001 and Lawrence of Arabia. And then the acknowledgement, well, it's Twitter. Of course he's going to get yelled at.
Yeah.
But I hope it comes up. There was a great one, a great reply, and it looks like it's not going to be here, which is kind of a bummer. Oh, well. It was a great shot of just outdoor screening in Africa. Outdoor screen, Jim. And how did it? It was pretty cool. So outdoor screen. You see people outdoors, but of course, it's somewhere rural Africa, and being projected, and behind the rather small screen is a cow. And so the comment, seeing Dune as intended by the filmmaker, it's like, you see it. I mean, and we'll get into it, I think, at the craft, but you'd said right at the top of your show, yeah, it's theater worthy. But that doesn't, you didn't say, and you and I have never said theater necessary.
Yeah.
I mean,
it helps, but. You want the best viewing experience you can get. And I still remember, speaking of Lawrence Arabia, and I've probably mentioned it on this show before, seeing it in one of those great old theaters near UBC in Vancouver. And they had that surround sound thing, so you could hear the bells in Omar Sharif's tent behind you and to the side of you. It wasn't all just coming from here. It was was like a surround sound thing, which is all part of the.
But you know what, though? That was not in the original. Like, they might have had quadraphonic sound in some theaters.
Yeah.
When it came out. Yeah. Most of it, heck, they're still having a hard time getting theater owners to put stereo in. What you heard was a remastered Dolby. At a much later date, right?
Yeah. It was the late 80s, I want to say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They went, ooh, let's polish this thing
Oh,
off.
and it was
Let's
just
redo the audio.
you're just like, I'm in a tent, and it was the best. It was one of the best experiences I'd had, and a great movie to have a great viewing experience with.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you want the best, best situation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jim, I think it's anything else you wanted to add before we actually get to never mind the talk about the movie and around the movie and while the movie is screening.
No, I think we can get into it. Yeah, don't forget to do you're doing the checklist first.
I'll do my usual shtick, but
Okay,
is there anything you wanted to add about that before we get into it?
No, I think that should do it.
All right. Okay, I am taking over then.
Sure.
All right, everybody. Yes, tonight we are talking about Dune. Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Frank Herbert's classic Dune. For those of you who don't know, haven't watched it, I don't think that's anyone in the chat, but you never know. Here's the movie's deal. Dune is set in a galaxy. It's ruled by a feudal emperor. And it's where the so-called noble great houses, the Monopoly Spacing Guild, and the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, kind of a stand-in for the Catholic Church, all scheme for position and power amongst themselves and over the most valuable commodity in that galaxy, spice. And spice can only be found on one world, conveniently, Arrakis or Dune. And it's in Dune, the movie, that in this context, we're told the story of the son of one of those nobles and how he is taken in by the Fremen, Dune's indigenous people, who think that he might be their prophesied Messiah. It's directed by, as mentioned before, Denis Villeneuve, written by John Spaihts, Denis Villeneuve, and Eric Roth, based on the book by Frank Herbert, named Dune, starring. And I'm going to read out damn near the whole cast because they're all noteworthy and amazing. Might be giving you an idea of how I felt about this film, but, if you saw our Jim and I's parking lot reaction, you know how I felt. Anyway, starring Timothée Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Oscar Isaac, Josh Brolin, Stellan Skarsgård, Zendaya, Jason Momoa, and Javier Bardem. But wait, there's more. Also starring Dave Bautista, Stephen McKinley Henderson, Chang Chen, Sharon Duncan Brewster, and Charlotte Rampling. As far as let's look at the social nutrition checklist now. Could it, will it earn a reframe stamp? No, it will not. Is it union made? Yes, it is. Did it pass the Bechdel test? Now, until an hour before the show, as I was putting some of this stuff together, it's like, no, it didn't. But yeah, I'm going to argue it did. Although I'm open to other interpretations of the scene, which we can talk about later in the spoiler zone. And then last but not least, is it class conscious? Here, I really struggled. And in the end, Jim, I ended up putting a question mark here, actually, in the list because it's medieval. It is a medieval context. And, oh my God, I'm going to quote my father again, Robert Marx. Or Ricardo. Marx wasn't the only person who talked about how class relates to the means of production. He says, but it's an improper model to apply to a feudal world. And I was like, oh my God, I have to agree with my dad. It is. So I put a question mark. And so I figure until we see the next movie, hopefully there'll be a next movie. But until we see that, I think all I can really say here is stick a question mark on it and say this movie got 2 out of 3, which ain't bad, 67%.
Yeah. I thought you were
So
giving it 2.5 there, but yeah, 2 out of
no,
3. Yeah.
yeah, I do think there's a consciousness in this film that goes
Mm,
beyond your typical petty bourgeois, you know, yeah, the let's say white middle class, upper middle class American worldview. Yeah, it does go beyond that.
yeah.
Even North American worldview. But to apply it the way we've applied, or I've applied this metric, I think is, you know, but I'm open to anyone in the chat who says, oh no, Rob, X or Y, like, you know, tell us what you guys think.
Yeah.
What else is there to say about the movie? Except to, yeah, I think we're in the quick review now, my friend.
Hmm.
Why don't you start us off?
Sure. Well, this is highly anticipated, of course. And I think we were lucky. I think it worked both for and against us watching the old one a couple weeks ago because you're able to compare it, number one, and just to, and like I said to you on Thursday night when we saw this, whenever you get a new version of a movie, it's not just a new version, but it's a new interpretation, right? And it's like when different theater companies do Shakespeare in a different, I'm not comparing Frank Herbert to Shakespeare, but
Yeah.
when they do Shakespeare, they do them in different ways. I've seen Romeo and Juliet a number of times. A couple times Romeo's, absolutely murdered. Who does he fight? Mercutio or Tybalt or whoever.
Yeah.
And other times usually it's accidental because you don't want the hero killing somebody on purpose. Anyway, so you have a new interpretation. So that's great. The chance to see this on a big screen as well, and especially in this age of COVID, when you haven't seen a lot of movies on the big screen, I think that plays into it as well. And the reason why it's bad that we watched why it could be bad that we watched the last one so recently is that you're comparing the two when instead of just looking at it on its own. So, after what was done, how did I feel?
You're
I
going to
thought,
say after many qualifiers.
yeah, after many qualifiers. Sorry, I was thinking about this
You
all day.
know,
And how
you're not before a parliamentary committee.
there we go. Epic. Fantastic. Pretty thrilling in parts. Like I was taken by the whole thing. It's a 2.5-hour movie. That's pretty thickly plotted, and I was along for the entire ride. The cast was wonderful. I don't know that there was many sour parts. There was a few lines that were a bit clunkery, typical of science fiction. But I just thought it was a wonderful work of vision. There's a real vision behind this. I felt there was the sound. The soundscape was great, and things like just the effect of that voice power that Paul and his mother have, and a few others. That was fantastic. It was just a wonderful trip to the movie, like a wonderful cinematic evening at the movies. I'm glad I saw it in the theater. I don't know if it would have translated as much, on the small screen initially anyway, but I'm glad that when we saw it for the first time, it was in the theater. And it's that immersion, right? You're not looking at your watch. You're not stopping it for a bathroom break, just a fantastic movie. I'm sort of eager to hear your thoughts on it because I can't really think of too many weaknesses. I did have a question. If people who aren't familiar with the source material would like it. I know Upside Dan said that he quite liked it in his review, but I'll pass it on over to you with that.
Yeah. Okay. Quick answer to your question there, anecdotal answer to your last question there, Jim. I'm surprised at the number of people who said, I liked it. I'm going to have to watch it again. I don't know if I understood everything, but I did like it. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes to the strength of this movie. For myself, loved the book when I was a kid. It is one of those few books I every now and then return to either read entirely or pick favorite sequences, favorite scenes, favorite moments, and reread at least that part. So coming into this, I actually tried to dial my expectations down. It is a big, thick, dense book. We have been, disappointed by, oh, this is the adaptation, about hype and buzz. And I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed myself in this film. As you said, Jim, I felt the scope. I felt how big it was. I felt like I was being immersed in a world, while at the same time not being spoon-fed what it was about. That I was being immersed in a world, but attached to characters in it. And that I got to feel for them. I got to see them as human beings within this world, within this social structure, all that stuff. And so by the end of it, I was, and I mentioned this the other night, my chest was tense. I was in it. I wanted to know how it was going to play out, even though I intellectually know what is next. Sure, there were like a couple of creaky kind of, it's a little, and even there'll be still a couple, and we'll get into it later, moments from the book that I thought could have been better shown in the film. But yeah, no, I was like, what a great film. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think I'm on something on this is, it's the same reason that the people who don't have the background knowledge that I do still liked it, still enjoyed it, because it did that core thing, which is, here, we have people in this big world. We're not going to give you a course. You don't need to study for it. We're not going to dumb it down, but we're not going to spoon feed it. But we are going to give you these great fleshed out characters you're going to get to know and like or be fearful of, and draw you in. Another YouTuber, Flow Reviews, Francesca Florentini, she made the comments like, I'm going to have to go watch it again. But not in got to go watch it again. I don't get it. Not that. No one's lost in it. They may be hanging on, but they get to hang on to the characters. Yeah. I really enjoyed this movie, and I'm so glad other people are, especially, Jim, because it's a hard sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
And when we get to story, I'll elaborate on that. I want to elaborate on that because, even as I was pontificating perhaps, opining the other night in a friend's home about the difference between space opera and science fiction, I might be off on this, but I still want to talk about it. But anyway, sure. There's my take, man. Let's, what does that really mean? I think that means we're moving into the spoiler zone, eh?
Yes.
Is that it? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The spoiler zone.
Everyone dies. First
of all, DMG did correct me. It's Florentina Faconti is who I'm thinking about. Okay. Thanks for the correction. DMG. And let's also quickly welcome our friend, the man who's doing better than we are on YouTube, the big jerk, Walt, Vlad65. How you doing?
Woo!
Good to see you here, man.
Well, our football team beat his football team last night, so that was...
Yeah. Well, apparently he was kind of upset about certain calls, wasn't he?
I can't really say that because I cheer for both teams. Yeah. But anyway.
Okay. Listen, before we get into the craft, I am going to shamelessly beg everyone for a like. And of course, because that's just comes with the territory, Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that bell. I love hearing that ring in my thing. Okay, again, The Craft. Jim, why don't you kick us off?
Okay. There's one point that I wanted to make specifically, is that in the first movie, and I know I complained about sort of comparing the two, but when we watched the Lynch one, when they were in, so some of the characters trained in the Bene Gesserit way have this voice that compels people to do, it's like a commanding voice.
The voice.
The voice. And when they used it in that Lynch version, it was just kind of like this. Like it was just
the voice.
There was no effect. And in this one, just to show the difference, and I think this is a good analog for how this one was different than the previous one. The first time Paul uses it, it's like a freaky aural experience. Like it's like a boom boom. It's like a bass drop with a delayed voice, and I don't even know how to explain it, but it was an effect. And that was one of the things that I neglected to mention that first time, is that the navigators, their voices, for as big a set piece as the navigators were, you didn't have a special voice. They just sounded like dudes. And the voice, this powerful voice weapon, didn't sound like anything really all that much different. This one did. So that's an example of how the craft improved in this one. And two, more outdoor shots, more sort of natural,
real outdoor,
natural lighting, as natural as movie lighting is. Not talking Dogma 95 or anything, but there was, as soon as the first 20 minutes, I thought, like, none of this, of course some was shot on sound stages in Hungary or whatever, but it didn't look like that. I mean, the look was that of different planets.
Yeah.
And apparently it was filmed partially in Norway, partially in Abu Dhabi and Jordan. And man, just the look of it was outstanding. And it had a texture to it, and just the quality of light was different. And I mean, they felt like it felt like a different planet. Like, and they didn't use anything that we were super familiar with. Like, there was no Game of Thrones sets necessarily, or Northern Ireland locations. It felt like a different kind of the location scouts had done, those weird little rock formations in the desert were kind of cool. And they clearly not, the American West or anything that we were used to either. So it was kind of cool to read up on the locations afterwards. But yeah, and craft wise, otherwise the cast was outstanding. I thought Rebecca Ferguson, the mum's always got is a pretty meaty role in this Lady Jessica.
Yeah.
And it was in the past one, that was probably one of the stronger roles in the Lynch version. And again, Rebecca Ferguson did a great job on her role as Lady Jessica. She's just sort of all over the place emotionally, and absolutely, I believed every second she was on the screen. I believed her torment. So, how about you? Did anything stand out for you in terms of craft?
Well,
or
it's almost impossible. All of it.
Fair enough.
I will, though. You know what, Jim? I could just echo what you said. Just copy what you said. I do want to add, and I wonder if anyone else noticed this. I thought I heard it. I thought there was moments and even moments in the music cues where I'm like, oh, that's a shout out. That's like a little motif shout out to the first movie, to David Lynch's movie. Yeah. And some of the shots where it was like, is this a trolling moment? Like, that is the same bad shot. Like, all the guys running out of the Atreides soldiers when they first run out onto the field, the ship field, the airport field, whatever, the spaceport field. And I swear to you, it's like, put it side by side with the same moment in the first in the 84 movie and David Lynch's movie, you're going, that's the same lame shot that shows no scope and everything. And if I notice it, Villeneuve knew. And I was thinking, it's like, is that a little bit of weird respect to the earlier film? Like, kind of a, hey, I know I'm not the first to tread on this ground. Let's pick a lame part. And
he seems like a pretty classy guy. Just from the, and it was a real labor of love too. So yeah.
Well, I think, and I didn't mention in the quick review, but yeah, every aspect about this film, and I'll stick. You can almost start every point we're going to talk about is how Villeneuve and the rest of the filmmakers liked this book and wanted to do it justice. And so the actors become enthusiastic because they know it's a passion. There's a love for the subject matter from the director and from the producers and that filmmaking team, and that permeates, I think, everything in this, where everyone is, you get everybody's A game. And you get everyone's enthusiasm, Jim, like wholehearted enthusiasm. And I think you really see that, whether it be the set design, the cinematography, the performances, everyone's A game. And you mentioned this, but I think it bears repeating, unified. The look, the sound, the performances, it's a unified piece. Everyone's on the same page. They're doing their thing, but they're on the same page. like Gidi Prime and Vladimir Harkonnen, it's like as gross as ever without being like in a way far more terrifying.
Yeah.
Than the last one where it was just, oh, please don't touch me. You're disgusting.
Yeah.
You're disgusted, but you're also horrified by Skarsgård's Baron Harkonnen. Dave Bautista, all of a sudden you're like, well, okay, he is the Beast Raban. That's a human animal, and that's what he's bringing out in a performance. I've always had a soft spot for Dave Bautista. I think he's got range that is only limited because he's such a massive physical specimen. But we're seeing some of that range in his performance here. Again, unified whole. The one thing I'll say, I'm like, if this doesn't get nominated, heck, even if it doesn't win for best costume design,
No.
I'm like kind of, what? Boy, I hope the thing that beat it was truly worthy of beating it. It certainly does. Everything of what we talked about will get that Oscar buzz. Who knows how it'll do? Like, as you were saying about some of our colleagues who love talking about, oh, this is my top 10 movies of this year. It's like, got some time left.
Yeah, just give it a couple months. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, give it a minute. Anyway.
What good movies come out in fall and winter anyway? Those are all on their way. But another thing we talked about on Thursday night, not on camera, and that I thought was just you mentioning costumes, is that Baron Harkonnen was intimidating, and even that whole, like, if you compare, again, I'm comparing the old one to the new one, but the wire work with the earlier version and this one where he just sort of seems to levitate all over the place himself, the Baron Harkonnen figure. A lot of these characters, there was a frightening human but not human quality. So when Baron Harkonnen sort of rises up, his clothing trails, so he looks like a 17-foot tall man. when the Bene Gesserit come in, they've got these strange cube heads. I think we're talking about that uncanny valley thing, that thing that looks human but isn't quite human. And so there's some of the shots even had kind of almost seemed to have a horror basis in them. There was something, and again, I said to you, Doctor Who uses this in great effect. Figures that are somewhat human but not quite, and so there was a lot of shots of like twirling robes and covered faces and really that had sort of a real horrifying effect. I felt anyway. Small h horrifying. Like I wasn't screaming or anything like that, but it was super compelling, and the imagery was really, what would just normally be a normal scene sort of turns into this like, gets your heart going a little bit too. So they did that quite well. I felt.
Yeah, I agree. We've got a few comments going on and I've been displaying them, Jim. Most have already blown past. They're getting into my favorite spot, the meaning already, and a bit of story, but we'll just keep plugging away, folks. We will. And if for whatever reason we forget your comment and it's relevant to the part we're talking about, remind us, just repeat the comment. We'll be on top of it, Jim, let's move on then. Let's keep moving forward.
Sure.
Let's talk about the story. And why don't we start with a commenter in the chat, our friend from the West Coast, the left coast, Vlad, who says, and let me find it. I hope I can find it.
While you're looking for it, I'm going to ask him if there was the big storm. There was supposed to be a big wind storm, my stepmom was saying, in Vancouver today anyway, that she was battening down the hatches. So I didn't hear how that went.
Yeah. So I found it, Jim.
Gotcha.
Okay. So Vlad65 says, question, loved his, Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner, but thought it was a tad over long. I would agree. Was that an issue with this one? Yeah. Jim, you answer first.
Sure. One of the issues, and it was more probably, I didn't ascribe it to the film, I ascribed it mostly to me, was that there's a big, the big battle, the big attack on the House Atreides comes kind of 2/3 of the way through the movie, or is done with, and there's still another, I'd say, half an hour left of the movie, and so you almost have to train yourself. It's almost like listening to music an 8/5 time instead of 3/4 time. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there was a different rhythm to it. So you're sort of wondering, all these natural beats that you're used to are a little bit different. It's like, where is this going to end? And where is this, what's the jumping off point where you, to be continued? And so that last half hour, I was like, is this the end? Is this the end? But not because it was boring, but because there seemed to be not necessarily a natural break. And they did it, as soon as they met the Fremen and they had a bit of a face off with them, figured something out, and they like, okay, let's continue to our siege, our little headquarters, and then cut. So that was, the rhythm of it was a little odd, but I think it's more on me than anything. It just didn't follow the typical beats of a normal Hollywood movie, right? With the crescendo and the denouement and the whole thing. So I don't know. Did you feel the same way?
No, well, mind you, I was like, once we were kind of well into the third act, I know where this is going to end. That would make sense. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't. I think maybe what you're feeling, Jim, though, was you're applying 3 acts, and somebody who's like, even though he doesn't know he's going to get money for the second movie, this is part 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's part 1 of a 2-parter. And what is that? Where's that logical point where you go, okay, this part of the book is done. We're moving into another part of the book. You could potentially make a trilogy out of this, and this would still be a place where you go, okay, yeah, to look at Paul Atreides, let's say, maybe not a hero's journey, but it is. He's gone through this one big change, right? It is the story about how he comes to the Fremen. You know, the story of Jim, of his youth, you know, of the opener. You know, this is the opener. Here was how he met. You could imagine around a campfire, you know, putting it in mythic terms, putting it in a storyteller sense, saying, well, let us talk about how Muad'Dib, Paul Atreides, how he came to the Fremen. Mm-hmm. This is the world he left. This is the world he's from. This is what happened. This is the story of his father's death. This is where he came from. This is how he came to us. And then the next part of the story is him becoming Fremen. You know, and then, of course, you have the return, you know, the return to the, quote, normal world, a truly changed man who accomplishes many things. Epic, also dark and terrible.
Yes.
But so I think that going back to the waltz question, and I can see where you're coming from, but I think if you look at it that way, go back to the book and just kind of go, oh, yeah, this is where you'd end it, you know, because that's, in a way, one big act 1.
Mm-hmm.
For Walt's question, though, was there any fat? Was there any, why are we still doing this? I didn't think so. I was in it. Again, there's a couple of creaky moments, like a little kind of, you still have a hold on us. But at no time was I ever kind of going, whoa, we've been here a while. You know, I knew it was going to be long, but yeah, not Blade Runner 2049 long. That was 2 hours and 45 minutes? Like,
was it that long? Yeah. Okay.
Jesus Christ, it was long. Pardon my poor language, folks. But yeah. Oh my goodness. Just, wow. Everybody's here. Jelly Duck. Good to see you, Ahmed. I would have joined you when you were sussing with Buddy on Twitch, but yeah, I was prepping for our show tonight, man. But great to see you.
Geographically, we're covered by Nevada this evening and also the Middle East for Dune. So that's everyone else leave. No,
everybody here. Well, and this is, I didn't bring it up earlier. And you know what? I will wait until the meaning, but I will ask Jelly Duck, Ahmed, is anyone in, like in Kuwait newspapers, when they're talking about this, kind of noting it's like, wow, these Fremen really seem like Arabs. Why are there no Arab actors in this movie? That I'd be curious to, JD, if there's any, Ahmed, if there's anyone talking about that, if you could chime in the chat. And then when we're talking a bit more about that and the meaning, you know, that would be great. Or if no one's talking about it and it's more of a North American thing, be great to know that too. All right.
Cuba's in the Middle East, isn't it? Javier.
Javier.
But you should have just gotten the guy, the Arab dude from The Mummy. You know, I haven't seen him in a while. I'm sure he's.
Oh yeah, Oded Ferrer.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Wow.
Great,
yeah, you're right. Yeah. How could you not? I mean, what a cool, smooth guy. What a great name.
Yeah.
Oded. Okay. folks, where am I here? Where am I? Oh, yes. Jim, we did start with Vlad's question, but what, in general, what did you guys think? Like, or what did you think, Jim, story-wise, storytelling-wise? I think I pretty much said everything I was going to say about it. Yeah. I have 2 more comments, but I can wait until you're done.
Well, I had one sort of quibble, but this movie, and in watching this is where watching the first one was instructive, is that it tried to burn through everything in about the same amount of time, right? This one, you're aware of how all these things, the challenges, the filmmakers are able to sort of describe the challenge that the Atreides family and crew faces. So not the least of which is getting the Fremen on Paul's side. So that's treated as instead of just like a little minor obstacle, essentially the climax of this first movie, right? It's not a given. It's not like a little thing that's dealt with. It's like a major thing, and there's major costs for it. And there's a duel to the death that has to be dealt with. Only then are they guaranteed sort of passage on to movie number 2, essentially, hopefully, touch wood. But so the time that's given to each of these points of the story, I think, shows what the family is up against in a greater way, in a more sort of intimidating way. Again, as opposed to being a minor inconvenience or a 10-minute set piece. So that's good. So it's good we the gift of time, the luxury of time works well in this case. One of my quibbles is
while still having enough to do.
Yes, yeah.
Like there's still there's a ticking clock. We got to move. We're under pressure. Wait, there's schemes going on that we're aware of but don't have proof of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's if anything, I would have some of the changes I would have made were shown a lot of, Zendaya is supposed to be this mystical kind of figure that we see through Paul's dreams, and we see a lot of her, like full on face, clothing and all that, what she looks like, how she handles herself, what she looks like in the desert. I would like to have seen less. I mean, we all know where it's leading. It's you can tell by the cast notes. Yeah, that was that was siren on my end. Where it's leading to, but you don't necessarily. I would have liked just eyes or something a little more dreamlike and a little more puzzling. You didn't see her face on, and you saw a lot of her. That was one of they kept on going back to this. Every time he would dream of her, you'd see like a full body shot. And I think you could have sort of handled that a little more subtly. But that in terms of story, that's one of the few quibbles I had. In terms of breaking down the complexity of it, I thought they did a fairly good job. There's a little bit of exposition at the start. I think it was narrated by Zendaya. Gets you, tells you the situation.
Yeah.
Not to maybe 2 minutes, maybe.
Barely.
And
we heard more from Cate Blanchett at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring,
or the little
with the whole set piece,
the Star Wars role about taxation in the newer movies and that sort of thing. But those things were nicely handled. We're given the information at an appropriate rate.
But
it's not
just enough to get us to the next scene.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And they refer to him as like they did in the Lynch one, but it was better handled. They mentioned the one. Basically, there's the Majid. The Kwisatz Haderach.
Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah, I'm probably going to mispronounce all these things, but you know,
the
there's several
Mahdi, the
Mahdi.
Kwisatz Haderach, the Lisan Al Gaib, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. But I mean, from context, you can tell what they're
Yeah,
referring to. The chosen one, right?
yeah,
And that's
the
that.
savior.
But it's well handled, and I don't
Yeah,
think they did that so much in the first one.
yeah.
And they didn't mention the whole Mod Dib thing hasn't been,
The Mahdi.
hasn't quite
Yeah,
happened yet. But
yeah.
yeah, so information nicely doled out. Pace was good. Yeah, I thought it was fairly well handled. You had a few quibbles though.
Well, it's first I'm gonna quickly. There's a couple comments in the chat I want to catch up on here. First, Vlad65 costumes. Sometimes the Oscar voters don't seem to favor the big obvious choices, which DMG. Yeah, agreed with. The only thing I'll push back on there is that's exactly when they hand out costume, etc. In part because those are actually voted on by costume designers, but it doesn't quite get caught up in the same drama. Or, yeah, you see the movie that probably should have won Best Oscar wins a bunch of lesser, quote, lesser awards because, well, it's almost like a consolation prize. It's like, well, tell you what, you get to go home. Here's your consolation prize. Best sound effects. Anyway, for myself, Jim, I think there's a couple of scenes in the film that I think could have been handled, could have hewn closer to the book and been a better scene for it, been a better character moment for it. One was a smaller scene at the beginning with Jessica and the Reverend Mother. Because in the book, there's actually a moment of tenderness between them. They do have a past together, and both resentment and tenderness all bound in the same thing, which would make the Reverend Mother more human. Mm-hmm. Even though she is this crone, totally co-opted by the system she's in, right? Like totally informed and infused. I can't quite think of the right word right now. But I think if that scene was in there just to build a little more humanity in all these people. The other that I probably had, I don't want to call it a big problem because I still really enjoyed this film. But yeah, I think if the final scene, the fight between Paul and Jameis happened the way it happened in the book, a little more fulsome, like it felt a little small and rushed. And if it had a bit more of what was in the book, because it's a really important, at that thing, you learn, like both are learning about each other, but you really do learn so much of how the Fremen work in this scene, in that fight, in the rituals that happened right after. I think it felt a little rushed and it could have been a little fuller. I hope that they have the other half of the scene, or let's say the other half of the sequence, the immediate chapter. I hope that's the way they kick off the next movie, because it really does inform the world they've left, the world they ostensibly understood. Now they're entering into that different world, the world of the Fremen, and I hope it hews closer to it because it really kind of sets it sets the whole scene, it sets the whole context of what they're entering into and how Paul changes. It's almost like here's the first step on your path into the dark woods. The hobbits have left the Shire.
Yes.
And they're now in the Mirkwood. I think it's the Mirkwood, right? Or it's the Old Forest. Never mind. Sorry. That would be my only, and it's not, it's more than a quibble, but it's less than a beef. Do you know what that distinction I'm trying to make here?
You need a scale of these things.
We do, we do have some comments regarding story. here, I want to pick out a couple. Like, I mean, there's a number of things. You know what? The chat's having its party. You and I are having a conversation, and every now and then there's some overlap. I do want to disagree with DMG here. He says the break end of the film suffered from the same, in caps, problem as the Hobbit movies, making multiple films from the same book. You know what? I'm gonna, maybe I don't disagree with you, DMG, but I do beg to differ on this, in that the Hobbit movies, that was a thin book that never needed to be three fucking films. Pardon my poor language. Whereas this is a big, thick, deep book that is worthy of. One of the reasons 1984 Dune didn't work is because they're jamming a big, thick book in one film. And it shows it. It wears that rushed, we don't get to know anyone, it's a bunch of exposition. I think you can break up a book into multiple movies if the book is worthy of it. You know, and this book has enough in it, and not just enough in world building or stuff, but enough plot and character development that you're like, okay, this is when he's a boy. This is the part where he becomes a man. Here is where he comes back and does things in a weird, negative Star Wars.
Yes.
Which leads me to another thing I wanted to comment on. So as opining, I was at Friends last night, and they were about to go see the movie. And I was saying, oh yeah, hard sci-fi. And my friend, one of them asks, is like, well, what's the difference, you know, between that and space opera? And I'm, well, Star Wars is space opera. This is hard sci-fi. And then I kind of got into the definition, Jim. And I kind of said, the thing about Dune is it takes an epic, but it says, okay, what environmental thing would have to happen? Then we put human beings in it. That's how I've always kind of looked at science fiction, is that there's some technological advancement, it triggers a sociological change, which may trigger technological advancement. And Dune is such a great example of that. They develop shields. Like, the reason you don't see any lasers is they developed shields. You hit a shield, personal shield, with a laser, you basically get an A-bomb of an explosion. So all of a sudden they're back to knives. Because way back when, they had a revolution, a jihad, literally a jihad, against computers, really anything mimicking the behavior of a human mind. All of a sudden, they have to use this drug to help expand their brain to deal with the things, because it's a feudal world that knows space travel. You know, it's like it had to reorganize its society based on this cultural thing that happened in reaction to a technological thing. And that, I think, is like that's sci-fi to me. But at the same time, you know, whereas and I love Star Wars, but I was like, we've got a dark knight and a white knight and a princess in a castle, you know, which is a gross oversimplification, but it's almost like you could say that Dune is a decade and a half before Star Wars came out, you know, is the response to that epic narrative. You know, it's like okay, let's see how it would really work. What is that hero really like? And these are part of the questions it's exploring. And this is kind of but I wanted to know what you think, and I wanted to know what the chat thought, because it's almost like you can almost you're almost chasing your own tail with this definition of hard sci-fi. But yeah, do I sound like I'm talking out of my ass, or?
No, I mean, you know, one of the things that I thought of, and this is going to make sense to some people in the chat and not makes any sense whatsoever. Watching this, I got a real big Omni magazine vibe from watching it, from the
Okay.
art direction to the storytelling. Omni was this old science fiction magazine that was put out by the same guy who
Bob
put out
Guccione.
Penthouse magazine.
Old
And it
sleaze bag.
except for the nudity,
Nudity.
nudity, it really didn't. There was none in Omni, but they both had the same layout. I think that the Omni font was sans serif or whatever. But when I was a young teen, I would buy Omni magazine and dig into it and promptly not understand anything because it was this. So it was good for me to read challenging things at the age of 12 or 13, but they had short stories in it that were like,
well, excuse me,
were not like Star Wars, that were not like the typical stuff that I'd read, but were hard science fiction. And that's sort of what I like, something that's a little less audience friendly. What's the distinction here? I guess it really took.
It ain't Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
It's not this kind of, how do Richard L and Katie will understand what I'm saying. Booga booga. Force, space magic, warp speed. Yeah. Like that space magic. There is, for all the metaphysical references, there's less space magic in this.
Yes. Yeah. And it's based on, it's obviously fantastical, but the fantastical aspect of it is more based on, pragmatic things, and less on the whimsy of story. So you had, the stories were heavier and maybe not as positive and were a little more complicated in how people reacted to something. They wouldn't necessarily be monster stories. They wouldn't necessarily be, stories that would end in a fight. It would just, and often with sort of an open ending, like a lot of good science fiction. So that's sort of where I make the distinction. Although if you just said, what's the difference? And you said Omni magazine, you'd probably get a quizzical eyebrow pointed at you. But that's sort of where I was going with that is that it's a little bit of a harder, got a harder aspect to it, a little bit less digestible than something like a space opera.
Like a space opera, space fantasy, fantasy, they're almost always just basically myths, with different wrappers, different costumes. Yeah. Again, I would say this is more like Game of Thrones, but in a science fiction context, kind of like, okay, let's have real human beings doing this stuff. Because if you look at Star Wars, The New Order, you never want to kind of, like, part of the problem with episode 1 was it's like, oh, wait, you're asking me to judge this world realistically. All right, none of this makes sense. How do you afford these space cruisers? How do you build anything that big in secret? You don't. How does this economy work? Exactly. Like, nothing makes sense. And I think that's part of the difference with, let's say, Dune or Game of Thrones or like the books, and a big chunk of the is here. This is how this world would actually work. Let's make it real with real people, humans being humans, but our context kind of, and this is, we're almost getting into theme here, but this is how it would work. This is what sci-fi does that I don't think fantasy does very well. They're talking to us at a different level. They're talking to us at a mythic level about larger, more simple is too pejorative, but it's the only word I got right now. Simpler truths about life. Speaking to us all as though we are heroes or whatever. Anyway,
I would normally, when I consumed whatever hard science fiction, I would feel different afterwards and maybe a little more unsettled. Not in the Twilight Zone episode way, but in that kind of like,
because it is, and we're going to get into this in a second. because it's hard sci-fi is always talking about what's going on now.
Mhm.
Star Wars is talking about us at all times. Maybe, do you know what I mean? Like, it's one of
Yeah.
the reasons the stories keep coming up. Whereas good science fiction is really talking about us now and what
Mhm.
we're doing now.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing that Dune is still applicable now. And that is some of the stuff people have already brought up in the chat and we're going to get into because I think it's time to get into the meaning. While the chat argues now about the Green Knight, I've already chimed in. I've chimed in twice. I even did a separate video on it.
Yes.
I'm not biting on that. They can argue amongst themselves. Folks, don't be rude to each other. Be kind. Kids, keep it quiet in there. Don't make me come down in that basement. All right. Jim, I do think it's time to jump into the meaning.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But do we want to, before we do that, maybe we should talk about what we are going to watch next week.
Oh, yes.
What do you think?
Sure, yeah.
Let me clear that. All right. Next week, Jim, why don't you tell us? Give it to us, brother. What are we? Because next week's Does It Hold Up movie too, isn't it?
It is.
And it's Halloween.
Well, speaking of...
That's crazy.
Speaking of unsettling science fiction combined with perhaps certain elements of horror, for Halloween, we are going to be taking a look at the classic Alien. There you go.
Space, no one can hear you screaming.
Nope, not even Sigourney. I don't know what that means. I don't know. And there's cats.
Yeah.
I have a cat.
Well, there is a cat.
I have a cat that's sleeping in this chair right here as we broadcast. But anyway, yeah, Yaphet Kotto as well, the late and great Yaphet Kotto. So yeah. So we're going to be taking a look at that one. We decided on that one because it does have elements of horror and it more closely hews to say Halloween than perhaps Aliens or a number of other ones. But
yeah. No, I think Jim. It's a great choice. You're the one I believe who's like, no, let's do this, and it's like, yeah, that's a great Halloween movie. A great Does It Hold Up? And we're looking forward to it. So, folks, mark it on your calendar. Next Sunday, Halloween. After you've finished taking the kids out and letting them go crazy, don't forget to tax some of the haul. Keep it for yourself.
Yes.
And join us on Jim and Rob Over-Analyze Movies.
I've got a skull here. I did a little bit of it. You can't really see it. I got my little.
Oh, looks good. I can see it. Here, let's give you more of the screen, man.
That's all. Woo! And I got a pumpkin up there. If you can see it, I put up I can't tell. I don't know if you can tell. It's orange lights, but I got the Halloween lights up.
There we go.
This in a frantic 5 minutes before we went on. So
I got all our logo nonsense.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Anyway, good on you, man.
Yep. Oh, thanks. Just rated the big, the big tub downstairs with all the gear. Went through it and it's
fantastic.
Getting set up. I thought we only have a week before the big days, so it's coming up.
All right. Okay. The meaning. Themes. So many themes.
So many.
Why don't you start us off, Jim?
Well, the one that sort of that I wanted to talk about the most, and this is maybe a bit of a stealth theme, but I think it has to do with the economics and the.
Oh, wait, 1 second. You're
Sure.
Absolutely. DMG raises this important thing about next week. How he'd like to look ahead at the best November movies coming in November. Of course, we'll have that. Perhaps by one of our good friends, Dragon Movie Guy. Totally unrelated to the guy who's reminding us of this. Sorry about that, Jim. It's like... Yeah, should have shouted that out. Of course, yes. As we have for several months now, Brian has been kind enough to come on the show at our end of the month, at the very start of usually the last show we do of the month. Come on and give us half of his list of what he's looking forward to. And as more and more stuff's coming out, it's not to be missed. This because it does. I mean, I'd say I'm pretty up on this, and I'm like, I didn't know that was coming out, so worth your time.
Yeah.
Jim, sorry to interrupt. Go back to
No.
what you were saying.
So yeah, a bit of a stealth one, and probably not the most obvious one, but as I was watching the big, what's the big refiner thing that they have, the big machine that gets eaten by the sandworm. They're big, they're big.
Oh, the harvester, the carrier, the carry-all, and the harvester.
And it was quite a, it's quite a horrifying the scale and the spectacle of all these things. And the harvester basically combs the sand for spice, belches smoke, and just it's a big piece of machinery. And I thought there was a real issue of sort of brought up the whole notion of a resource economy and how bad it was for the people on the planet, and also even though it's an arid environment, there was still life on it. There was those little mice, and there's little bits of plants and things like that, and none of this can be good for anyone, and it certainly wasn't for the Fremen, the people who live on the planet.
Well, they all looks like roughnecks. Remember when they got rescued? They look like roughnecks who got rescued off of an oil platform.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I think there was a real commentary, and in fact, it reminded me, and I had written it down afterwards. There's a Canadian photographer named Edward Bertinsky, and he takes pictures of the damage caused by open pit mining and oil exploration and that sort of thing. It sort of reminded me, and he did a movie recently, but and it sort of reminded me a little bit of Koyaanisqatsi, the famous 80s documentary of the sped up life in the city. Life Out of Balance, I think, was the subtitle. Siskel and Ebert were great proponents of this movie. It was a trilogy, and I think I've only seen the first one, but it sort of reminded me like the scale of this, like you're saying, the scale of a lot of things in science fiction is not necessarily what's the word I'm looking for? You can't continue this way, basically. Like it's an unhealthy way to continue.
I believe you're looking for unsustainable.
Unsustainable. Yeah, there's another word in there, but yeah, that's
unsustainable.
There we go. So I think there was a real sort of an environmental theme here, also a theme of unfettered capitalism, which is the cancerous literally the cancerous Harkonnen, well, in the first one, tribe is like capitalism run amok. So I think that's a couple of the themes there that they don't expressly talk about, but I think is kind of top of mind for me anyway.
Yeah. That's an interesting, myself, Jim, and I know Richard brought it up in a couple of his comments about how is this feudalism, and although maybe it's feudalism moving into mercantilism, perhaps, but yeah, I can see why people would say rampant capitalism, whereas I'm like, no, this is any of those conquistadors rolling into Central America, rolling into the Caribbean, rolling it, and enslaving the population to extract gold, to extract, like without any, there's barely a settler component here.
Yeah.
It's not like they're like, oh, well, we'll land our own people in. Well, like late mercantilism slipping into capitalism. This is very much a world where they're like, no, we'll go conquer those things, like the age of exploration and extraction. And the Harkonnens being just squeeze them for whatever it's worth. Although I suppose you could almost say there's so many human horrors, especially that Europeans have done,
Yeah.
the ones that we're really well aware of, Leopold and rubber extraction, in the Congo. But I think it's very much that where they're barely acknowledging, they're almost completely ignorant of what's going on in the area they're in. They roll in, they see something, and they're just stealing it like any other raider would,
Yeah.
and maintaining almost even Roman. Like it's why I'm like, there's too many things in this world that say this is pre-capitalism. It's a technological world, absolutely, but again, and I think that's part of the genius of Herbert, and is how can I create this so we've got a feudal structure, and I can refer to the book if I had it in my hand right now, be able to say, no, this is where Gaius Ellen Mohiam says we live in a feudal society that will not do anything with computers, blah, blah, blah. And then she opines for a while. I think that was a very conscious decision on his part. But that said, you could almost say capitalism is the taking some of the ugliest things of previous systems and making them efficient. You can see that, again, roughnecks on an oil platform, roughnecks on a rig, just out in the rigs, out in the tar sands.
Yeah.
Although in the 60s, they were only thinking they may be able to extract when he wrote the book. The way, these outside institutions, like just this imperium saying, well, this is mine. This is ours now. And the locals going, wait, what? What? Who are you again?
Yeah.
It's a Monty Python moment. I didn't know we had a king.
I didn't vote for you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's and so that idea, but I think the other thing is, and hopefully we'll see even more of it. Everything he's done up to this point, Villeneuve and his filmmaking colleagues have done up to this point, I have a high degree of confidence we'll see more of it, is the Fremen actually changing their world already on their own. And although they've been programmed, set up to believe in a savior, a riff on Catholicism, and the Catholic Church, and, it's working with the peasantry, working with them, wait, someone will come.
Working with them.
I think though that, where was it going with that?
Peasantry, Catholic Church.
I don't know. You know what?
Yeah.
It's, the environment.
Yes.
How this whole thing gets arrested, but even the environment, like how the Fremen are because of the environment they're in, how the Bene Gesserit are, how Jessica is because the environment, the cultural environment she grew up in, because there's the environmental limitations, and you could argue that the no computers is an environmental limitation. And so society had to figure out a way to deal with that, which created other structures, the Spacing Guild, and this thing having a monopoly because they had this guild secret to space travel, which is very, I think Herbert was consciously trying to make a quasi medieval world with interstellar travel, but yeah, the environment, and a big theme, and why Liet Kynes is an important character, is this idea. It's like, this world could be transformed, and it doesn't need a big outside bold, mega project from the federal government to fix it. That the locals can take power themselves, and they are doing it, which makes the argument that Paul Atreides is really a horrible tragedy, a horrible curse upon the Fremen, but.
Yeah, well, we will see if we're only a few books away.
Oh, wait, here. But we did get I did my whole spiel there. Richard L. says, the world feels pre-capitalist, but feudalism, if it exists in that universe, would be back on the Atreides home planet. Arrakis is more just raw exploitation, colonialism. Yeah, I'd agree with that distinction. But imagine a feudal world, put some folks on a ship and go steal that stuff, or go make it ours. Maybe. But yeah, Richard's got a point here. He continues. Both book and movie critique colonialism, but book seems more to critique bad colonialism, i.e. ignorance, dismissal of Fremen, than colonialism generally. I disagree with you there, but he continues. Movie is bolder in critiquing colonialism, e.g., what could you possibly offer us? But we won't get the full take until part 2 comes out. This is where, Richard, I disagree with you. The book is actually, like, in whether it be in comments outside the book that Herbert made, but even within the book, Atreides, Paul is a curse on them. Because if they were left alone, they would have changed the world on their own. It's not bad colonialism. It's colonialism he's critiquing, because Atreides Paul Atreides, in co-opting them and making them his personal army, just further integrates the Fremen within the imperial structure. And I don't think you can read the later books and not think that both the Fremen and the writer went, oh yeah, we picked the wrong horse. I'm sure there's some kind of like I don't think he is. I think he's all charismatic leaders should come with a warning label, but anyway,
Yes.
we'll have to wait and see. And actually, you know what? I will have to do some more research on that before I come back to it. DMG says, 21st century filmmaking. I'm half surprised Paul Atreides wasn't changed to Paul Atreides. Oh, that is so bad. Oh.
Well,
that's a hot take.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
There you go. All right. Well, you know what? He was wondering where that hot take was. DMG, you triggered hot take Henry. I know he's being just a smartass here, but at the same time, while it only barely passed our Bechdel test, like literally one nano, like I doubt Herbert would have had a problem if he did make the character a woman. I'm sure he would not have had a problem making Liet Kynes a woman. These women characters are so active, so of a time, while still being like, Jessica felt real in the book, felt real in the movie. Now that said, this middle-aged white guy says, boy, that's a realistic portrayal of women. I would love to hear. I would love to hear from women who saw the movie, women who read the book. That's something more research for Rob to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that, Brian's comment brings an interesting sort of a way in, fairly quickly to Liet Kynes, played by Max von Sydow in the first movie, is played by an African American or woman in this version, and is given more screen time, is given more agency, is sort of fleshed out way more, and is subsequently a lot more interesting. I found
absolutely
no slight on Mr. von Sydow.
Well, I think it, but I almost think that's Yeah, you're almost comparing apples to oranges then. It's not
Yeah.
Max von Sydow, it's that movie. It was trying to do too much.
Yeah.
You do
Yeah.
only get one scene with them, 1.5, I guess.
Yeah.
Whereas in the book, that character has more to say, is a lot more important to the history and the context. And in this movie, you get the time to learn that. And
Yeah.
that they made it a woman, makes no never mind to the plot and just allows for us to see more women characters playing important roles that aren't the spouse of or the mother of, a main character, which is, you could almost argue you could argue as a criticism, a problem with Jessica, but I think because Jessica is such an agent of why they're there, there is she is the one who chose to have Paul, to defy the sisterhood, to have a boy, not a girl, not for, partly her own ambitions, which I think is a more interesting character, not just to make her husband happy, but because she's like, I felt that I could create the Kwisatz Haderach, which just makes her more interesting, like a more human character,
Sharon Duncan Brewster, by the way, plays Liette Kynes. I looked up the name, so not to refer to her as that actress or whatever. Yeah. And she's English.
White man refers to actress as, she was black.
Yeah. She's English. She's Afro-American, I guess. But or Afro, no, hold on. Anglo. Anyway.
Yeah. You keep digging there, Jim.
Yeah. But
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
So in terms of meaning, have we covered it all?
There's so much
here, covered what we wanted to cover.
We're running out. We could almost do a part 2 on this. And if people did want to, if we wanted to do a special where we just come back to this film, I'd be up for that. I think this film rewards multiple viewings and longer discussion. Maybe that's just, I'm just thinking out loud now. While I also want to, I don't even have to reply. I've got it up on the screen there. She is like the wonderful and evil Lydia in I, Claudius, which was such a great show. Did you ever watch I, Claudius, Jim?
No, it's on the big pile of the big list, but no, it's.
Yeah. I'm with Vlad on that though. There is it makes just an interesting character of dimension, a human being, in its venality, but also its ambition. It's, and again, you're saying it earlier. One of the strengths of this film is it does take the time to get us, to allow us to get into these characters, Yeah. Oh, DMG, end of the year Dune podcast, part 2. Well, who knows though? Maybe we will do something when it comes out on video or like when a Blu-ray or something. Well,
yeah,
you know what? But yeah, okay, all right. We're getting there, folks. First of all, you know what? I don't want to pass up this opportunity to once more beg for a like. Remind you, if you haven't already, to subscribe, although you are the best chat on the internet. I'm sure you're all subscribed. And last but certainly not least, if you haven't already, ring that bell. All right. Yeah, Jim, we've got like 5 minutes of the show left. The best chat on the internet has given us so much material. You always copy it. You always copy it, Jim, and thank goodness, because if we do another one, we can go through, oh, that was a great comment that we missed.
Yeah.
That was another great comment. Oh, he's got a point there. Thank God we didn't bring that one up. I like being right. But anyway, let's move into Denny Villeneuve. Let
me just take this opportunity to remind people, Canadian director. Anyway, it's a good prop. Yeah, pass. Nice.
Absolutely. What?
Vision, and he was on, for those interested, if you, I'm pretty sure you could get it. There's a show on CBC Radio called Q. That's all. So all you do is nothing to do with QAnon. CBC Q. And Tom Power did an interview. The host, Tom Power, did an interview with him last week. It's a nice, chunky 35-minute
I saw that
interview.
on YouTube.
And it's really good. And he talks about how this was a labor of love. This was his favorite film, that as a teen, him and his buddies would storyboard it just for fun. I mean, this is pretty hardcore geek stuff here. And he, whenever he was asked, what would your dream job be, he would say invariably, I would like to do a remake of Dune, or do my own version of Dune.
Yeah. Direct Dune.
And that's, I think, what underscores this whole thing, was that it was a labor of love.
We saw that passion for the project.
Oh, 100%.
And obviously, and a studio or studios, two of them, they're legendary. It's a partnership between Warner Brothers and Legendary, who obviously believed in him, gave him the financing, and it doesn't look like a lot of notes were given. Okay, Jim. Quickly.
How about your pass or fail?
Yeah, but flying colors.
Yeah.
All right. Final thoughts, Jim.
We didn't really
lay them on us.
We didn't really talk too much about Hans Zimmer, who seems reinvigorated by this project. It sounded like a lot of the scores that you're hearing these days, but on its own, good on its own merit. This was not Miami Vice Hans Zimmer. Is that the guy who did it? It must have been. Anyway, this. I mean, he sounds reinvigorated. We didn't really even mention Timothée Chalamet, who I thought did a great job. And Kyle MacLachlan had a really nice tweet last week. He said, "Really looking forward to this. It looks dynamite." And so I thought that was a nice note of support from Kyle. But Chalamet is got some muscle going on here. He's carving himself out a really nice career, and he's not unable to make fun of himself, as he has done on Saturday Night Live a number of times too. But I thought he was a really great lead. I thought he did a really fine job. It's a complicated role. And one of the weaknesses of the first movie was not Kyle MacLachlan. So I thought both were fairly good leads. How about you? Final thoughts?
Oh, I could just, what? Here's my final thought. This is such a good movie, and based on such great source material that it obviously loves, that it, respects. We could continue to talk about it for another hour easy. And it's not like we haven't done it before. Really looking forward to the next installment. Really hope they make another one. I love the fact that I think Upside Dan mentioned it. It's not his cup of tea. He didn't like Blade Runner 2049. This isn't necessarily, one of his kind of go-to genres. He enjoyed it. Francesca, I still got to go back and watch it again. I'm not sure I understood everything, but she enjoyed it. That just shows like a great, a potential sign of greatness. Not the theater aspect, like that hot taker Patty Jenkins, but the fact that someone can go, enjoy it, feel it, and then still go, I think I need to watch it because there's just so much more, that it's dense without feeling overstuffed. Mm-hmm. It has a subtlety of ingredients, lots but subtle, that you're like, I need to try that again. I'm not getting the full... is that coriander or whatever the hell? Do you know what I mean? There's my last take. Vlad says another one. Any chance? It depends on how much money this one grosses. It depends all on
Yeah.
how much money this one makes. If this one's a stinker, there's going to be no part 2. For what we're hearing so far, Walt, it's doing pretty well. And it's done very well in the international market. So, yeah, with any luck, there'll be enough, which is kind of surprising, Jim, that it's doing as well as it did because it is hard sci-fi. You know, it's got action components, but it's not an action movie. It's got spaceships, but there's no dogfight. You know, it's different. It's an adult movie. It's not fun it's not Shang-Chi. It's not that 4-quadrant. Everyone will love it. This is not that movie, and it's doing well, which I think says a lot about how people will go see a movie if it really piques their interest, and you know they'll say positive things after if it delivers something. So
it's not drive-in science fiction. It's not necessarily drive-in theater.
No, absolutely. I think Walt did a great. It's like he has the coats ready for us, Jim. So yeah, it is that time to say goodbye. First of all, so what the hell? We'll lead it off with Walt. Sure. Yes, Walt. We will see you. Thanks for coming. We will see you in the in emails in a future email. Who's next? DMG. Love every time you come, even when I disagree with you. Actually, even more when I disagree with you. DMG, thank you so much. It is a good one. Hans and Franz Zimmer. All right. Who else? Who else am I missing? Richard L.
Yep.
Again, the love, and thanks so much for commenting colonialism, capitalism, etc. You've given me a lot to think about and more research to do because we will circle back on that in IRL, as the kids would say. But thank you so much, Rich, for coming. Katie, thank you very much for coming by. The Upside Dan, thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Katie, yeah, did you enjoy it? I think you might have mentioned something to that effect, but comment before we bugger off. Katie, though, thank you very much. Upside Dan, thank you very much. Again, thanks so much for coming. Thanks for bringing your comments, bringing your game to the best chat on the internet. Go check out his take on The Good Duel. It was an interesting thing, although it's like, still need a little comment on theme, man. All right, where are we here? Jelly Duck.
Jelly Duck, yeah.
Good to see you, brother. Katie is saying re-movie, but great to see you, Ahmed. Thanks for popping in, man. And Katie's about to say the movie. Whether or not she enjoyed it, it would. And I think I got it. Curtis Judd, our man, right? Basically not in Park City, but just outside of it. We'll
post his address later.
Yeah. Here's the Google shot of the house.
Look, there he is, mowing his lawn.
Looking up at the sky, going, what the? And Katie, this is a great way to end the show. Katie Fowler says it was worth the recliner seat money. And I no greater testament to how wonderful this film was. Alrighty, with that done, everyone, again, thank you all so very much for making it out tonight. And Jim, I guess we'll see you in the green room I think it's that time to what do they say? Oh yeah, let's cue the outro.
This means I'm going to have to read the book again.